When captured humans refuse to break under mental torture, the alien interrogators realize they've made a terrifying mistake. They've underestimated just how stubborn, boredom-hardened humans can be. The first contact didn't come through radio waves or blinking lights in the sky. It came as a scream that echoed across the minds of billions. No sound, no language, just pure terror injected into the brain like venom. Every human on Earth collapsed to their knees at once, clutching their heads as reality melted into abstraction. At first, they thought it was an earthquake, then a nuclear event, then a global neurological plague. But the truth became horrifyingly clear when the hallucinations began. People began to see things. The dead walking in the streets, time skipping like a broken film reel, loved ones transforming into something else mid-conversation. It wasn't physical. It wasn't even real. But it felt real, and that was enough to drive many to madness. The aliens called themselves the Vexari. They didn't come with ships or weapons. They came with thought. They were a psychic species, evolved to infiltrate consciousness itself. Where other species used tools to conquer, the Vexari used perception. Their method was terrifyingly simple. Destabilize a civilization's collective psyche, fracture reality from within, and then step in to take control of the broken pieces. It had worked on dozens of worlds before. It always worked. But Earth was different. The Vexari began their assault from orbit, wrapping the planet in a fog of psychic energy. It pulsed like a second atmosphere, invisible yet suffocating. Every human mind was now a canvas, and they began to paint nightmares with cruel artistry. People saw rivers of blood where streets once flowed. Mothers watched their children age to dust in seconds. Soldiers saw their own hands morph into claws and rip out the hearts of comrades they no longer recognized. And yet, humanity endured. At first, the aliens mistook the resistance as simple statistical variance. A few strong minds, they told themselves, but those few became more. Groups emerged, not military, not governmental, but small, chaotic bands of humans who somehow adapted to the psychic storm. They started calling themselves anchors. The anchors weren't immune. They felt the fear, saw the horrors, lived through mental disintegration. But they didn't collapse. In fact, they laughed. They joked about it. When one man's shadow turned into a snarling wolf and began chasing him down the street, he sprinted 5 blocks, dove into a dumpster, and yelled, "Bad dog! No treats for you tonight!" before bursting into laughter. When a woman saw her apartment walls melt into breathing flesh, she pulled out a paintbrush and painted sunflowers over the twitching muscle. When asked why, she said, "I figured if I'm going to lose my mind, I might as well decorate it." The Vexari were stunned. In their millennia of conquest, they had never encountered a species that laughed in the face of psychic collapse. Humor, irrationality, stubbornness, denial, human traits that defied logic and broke their models. They tried harder, increased the intensity, amplified fear, created impossible paradoxes. One man woke up every morning with a different identity, complete with memories. A week later, he created a YouTube vlog about it, ranking his favorite personalities and asking subscribers to vote on who should host next. The anchors began to spread, not because they fought the illusions, but because they embraced the madness without letting it own them. They found meaning in chaos, creativity in fear, and resilience in absurdity. One group even turned an abandoned theater into a hall of horrors, inviting people to come and laugh at their hallucinations together. One night, a man walked on stage, his head filled with the image of his father turning into a spider, and performed a stand-up routine about arachnid parenting. The crowd roared with laughter. This wasn't resistance. This was transformation. The Vexari began to fracture. Their hive mind was used to predictable reactions: fear, collapse, surrender. But now they were flooded with human thoughts, wild, non-linear, sometimes contradictory. They couldn't process it. They began to feel human emotions in return. One Vexery broadcast tried to simulate a nightmare of abandonment, only to find itself weeping under the weight of a memory it had borrowed from a child. A dog waiting by the door for a father who never came back from war. That was when the first Vexery defected. It took on a human form, not to hide, but because it had come to prefer the chaotic, fragile mental patterns it had once aimed to destroy. It introduced itself as alien, and it spoke directly into the minds of the anchors. "We came to break you, but instead, I've begun to dream." It wasn't all peace from there. Most of the Vexery still pushed on, desperate to reclaim control. They unleashed a wave of psychic loops, making entire cities relive the same hour over and over, but each time subtly altered. In Paris, the Eiffel Tower floated upside down for 3 weeks. In Tokyo, everyone spoke backwards, yet understood one another. In New York, pigeons began delivering apocalyptic sermons. But the humans, having already embraced the madness, simply added it to their lives. A bakery in Times Square began selling end-of-times croissants. They sold out every morning. The Vexery couldn't understand why humans weren't breaking, why they were adapting instead of crumbling. Elian explained it best. You think their minds are fragile because they are chaotic. But that chaos is what makes them unbreakable. You see fear. They see a story. You see contradiction. They see comedy. You offer them illusion, and they turn it into theater. In an act of desperation, the Vexery launched a psychic scream powerful enough to flatten the consciousness of an entire hemisphere. Trees shook. Oceans trembled. People dropped to their knees, and then a child in Brazil stood up and began dancing. No music, just joy. Others joined. A wave of dancing, laughter, and absurdity swept through the scream. The human mind didn't shatter. It danced with the madness. That day became known as the sway. It marked the moment the Vexery realized they had lost. Their hive mind began to crumble. Many returned to the stars, unable to bear the dissonance. A few stayed behind, some curious, some changed. The ones who remained began learning from the anchors, not how to resist, but how to feel. They had mastered perception. But now they wanted to understand emotion, the irrational glue that somehow made humanity stronger than logic could measure. Earth, now scarred but unbeaten, began to rebuild. Not just cities, but reality itself. The hallucinations never truly stopped. Some streets still flickered. Some people still heard whispers of other worlds. But rather than fear them, humanity embraced the unknown. Schools taught reality fluidity as a subject. Therapists worked side by side with reformed Vexery to help people navigate their mental landscapes. Artists flourished. The line between hallucination and imagination blurred, and nobody really cared anymore. The greatest monument of the new era stood in what used to be Berlin, a towering sculpture of a human brain, wrapped in spiraling ribbons of light that pulsed with music and laughter. At its base was an inscription, written in every language on Earth, and a few alien ones too. You tried to break our minds. You forgot they were already cracked. And through those cracks, our light shined. In the years that followed, the universe began to take notice. Other species who had suffered under the Vexery came seeking answers. Earth became known not for its technology or military, but for its resilience of thought. A species so broken it was invincible, so illogical it was untouchable. They didn't win because they were the strongest. They didn't win because they were the smartest. They won because they were human, and in the face of nightmares, they smiled back.